What a pilot calls the cops on a black teenager, claiming he looked out of place in first class. But in front of a packed plane, the boy's dad steps forward and flashes a federal badge that changes everything. This shocking confrontation exposes the true cost of prejudice and delivers a powerful lesson about power, privilege, and justice. Don't miss the twist that will leave you speechless. The golden FBI shield catches the overhead light, glinting as it's revealed in Dr. William Thompson's steady hand. A hush falls over the first-class cabin. Captain Richard Westmore's face drains of color, his mouth frozen mid-sentence. The passengers watching the confrontation collectively hold their breath. Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Dr. Thompson says, his voice calm but carrying enough authority to make the captain take a step back. But how did we get here? Let's rewind 40 minutes. Marcus Thompson slides his AP Physics textbook into the seat pocket and adjusts his headphones. At 17, he carries himself with a quiet confidence that belies his age. His fingers drum nervously on the armrest as he mentally reviews quantum mechanics formulas. In 3 days, he'll represent his school at the National Science Olympiad in Washington, D.C., the culmination of 4 years of relentless study and preparation. The first-class cabin of Flight 2187 fills with the usual pre-takeoff bustle. Marcus chose the window seat specifically so he could minimize interactions and focus on last-minute studying. The competition could determine his entire academic future. MIT has already expressed interest in his research on quantum computing applications, but a strong showing at the Olympiad could cement his scholarship prospects. His father had insisted on the first-class tickets. "You need to rest properly before the competition," Dr. William Thompson had said. As the Deputy Director of the FBI's Civil Rights Division, Dr. Thompson understands better than most the importance of occupying spaces confidently, especially spaces where black faces remain too rare. From a young age, Marcus has absorbed his father's lessons on navigating a world that often judges him before knowing him. Standing tall when entering upscale stores. Speaking precisely and confidently during academic competitions. Documentation always readily accessible. Ambition tempered with strategic patience. The memory of last month's physics teacher assuming he'd cheated on the regional qualifying exam flashes through Marcus's mind. Despite having the highest consistent grades in advanced placement courses, the accusation came swift and without evidence. Only after Dr. Thompson scheduled a meeting with the principal did the teacher reluctantly acknowledge his brilliance. Or the time at the local shopping mall when security followed Marcus and his friends from store to store, eventually asking them to leave for suspicious behavior, which turned out to be nothing more than enthusiastic conversations about robotics competition designs. Or just last week, when a woman clutched her purse tighter as Marcus passed her on the sidewalk while wearing his debate team hoodie. The small, everyday indignities that his father had prepared him for, but that still stung each time. Marcus glances at his watch. His father should be boarding soon. They'd separated at security when Dr. Thompson received an urgent call from his office. The competition weighed heavily on Marcus's mind. This wasn't just about personal achievement, he would be one of only 3 black students at the national competition. His success could inspire others at his school to pursue STEM fields despite the obstacles. The sound of the captain's voice interrupts his thoughts. "Excuse me," Captain Westmore says, his tone making it clear this isn't a friendly check-in. "I think you might be in the wrong section." And just like that, all of Marcus's preparation for the biggest academic moment of his life is suddenly overshadowed by yet another confrontation he didn't seek and doesn't deserve. But this time, everything is about to change. If you think racial profiling is still a major issue in America today, keep watching to see what happens next when power dynamics unexpectedly shift. 45 minutes earlier, Marcus had walked down the jetway with his boarding pass clutched in hand. The gate agent's double take as she scanned his first-class ticket hadn't escaped his notice. Just another moment to file away in the mental catalog of subtle looks he'd learned to recognize over the years. He'd stepped onto the plane with measured confidence, nodding politely to the flight attendant who welcomed passengers aboard. As he made his way to the first-class cabin, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. Conversations quieted momentarily. A middle-aged executive in a tailored suit glanced up from his laptop, eyes narrowing briefly before returning to his screen. An elderly woman clutched her handbag a little tighter as Marcus passed her seat. He pretended not to notice, having mastered the art of selective blindness to such reactions. His father called it strategic dignity, acknowledging racism without letting it consume your energy. Marcus found his window seat, 3A, and settled in. He placed his backpack beneath the seat in front, careful to take up minimal space. A habit born from experience, existing while black often meant making yourself as unobtrusive as possible in certain spaces. The businessman across the aisle kept stealing glances. Marcus pulled out his physics textbook, focusing on quantum mechanics problems rather than the unspoken questions hanging in the air. "Why are you here? Do you belong?" The cabin continued filling with passengers, most avoiding eye contact with him. A few smiled politely. One young woman, perhaps a college student, seemed genuinely unbothered by his presence as she took the seat across from him. Then came the announcement that boarding was complete. His father should have been in seat 3C, the aisle position, but the seat remained empty. The text on Marcus's phone explained the delay, urgent call. Boarding soon. Start without me. The flight attendants began their first-class drink service. When one approached Marcus with a warm smile, he politely requested apple juice. The brief normalcy felt refreshing. That's when Captain Richard Westmore appeared, ostensibly conducting a routine cabin check before takeoff. His gaze swept across the first-class section, pausing noticeably when it landed on Marcus. The captain's path through the cabin brought him directly to Marcus's row. He stopped, hands behind his back, pilot's cap tilted slightly as he looked down. "Excuse me," he said, voice carrying through the cabin. "I think you might be in the wrong section." The casual conversation around them quieted. Marcus felt heat rise to his face but kept his expression neutral, as his father had taught him. "Sir?" Marcus looked up, trying to keep his voice steady. "Coach is further back," the captain said, gesturing toward the rear of the plane. His tone suggested he was being helpful, but the assumption pierced through Marcus like a familiar knife. "This is first class." Marcus straightened in his seat. "I know, sir. I have a first-class ticket." He reached for his boarding pass tucked into his textbook. The captain was already shaking his head before Marcus could retrieve it. "Let me see some ID," he demanded, loud enough that the remaining conversations around them ceased entirely. The cabin grew painfully quiet. Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet, muscle memory taking over. His father's voice echoed in his mind, "Always comply calmly, but know your rights." "I'm traveling to D.C. for the National Science Olympiad," Marcus explained, producing his student ID card with its school logo and his photograph. "I'm representing my school." The captain barely glanced at it. "That's not government-issued identification. I need to see who purchased this ticket." The dismissal stung worse than the initial confrontation. Marcus had achieved more at 17 than most adults would in a lifetime: regional science fair champion, perfect SAT score, early admission interviews at Ivy League universities, yet here he was, being treated like an intruder. A flight attendant approached, concern evident in her furrowed brow. "Captain, is there a problem? We're scheduled for departure in 15 minutes. This young man," the captain emphasized the word young with subtle condescension, "doesn't appear to have proper documentation for first class." The flight attendant glanced at Marcus, then at the captain. "I served him just moments ago." His boarding pass was scanned at the gate. This small alliance sent a flicker of relief through Marcus. Someone else saw the injustice unfolding. "That's not the point," the captain insisted, his voice hardening. "Call airport security. We have an unauthorized passenger." The words fell like a hammer in the silent cabin. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Security. The ultimate escalation. The thing his father had warned him about countless times. Every eye in the cabin now fixed on him. Some passengers looked uncomfortable, others curious, a few even appeared vindicated, as if their initial suspicions about him not belonging had been confirmed. Marcus's face burned with humiliation. The quantum mechanics formulas he'd been reviewing vanished from his mind, replaced by the surreal horror of becoming a spectacle. "Sir, I have every right to be here," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "My father." "Your father?" The captain scoffed, cutting him off. "And who might that be?" The disrespect in the captain's tone ignited something in Marcus. Should he stand his ground more forcefully? His father had always emphasized the balance between self-advocacy and self-preservation. "Fight the battles you can win," his father would say. "Choose your moments wisely." Was this a moment to push back harder? Or would that only escalate things further, potentially leading to being removed from the flight and missing the competition that could determine his future? The security personnel would arrive any minute. The competition in DC started tomorrow. Everything he'd worked for hung in the balance. As Marcus weighed his options, struggling to decide how to respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension from 3 rows back. "That would be me." And the entire dynamic of the confrontation instantly transformed. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced profiling like this, and let's see what happens when this power imbalance suddenly shifts. From 3 rows back, a tall man in a charcoal suit rose slowly to his feet. Dr. William Thompson had been quietly observing the exchange, his jaw tightening with each passing second. He had boarded during the captain's initial confrontation with Marcus, choosing to watch rather than immediately intervene, a calculated decision born from years of navigating racial dynamics. "That would be me," he said, voice calm but carrying a weight that commanded attention. "Dr. William Thompson, Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The cabin fell deathly silent. Even the ambient sounds of the airplane seemed to dim in that moment. The atmosphere crystallized into something electric, dangerous, a turning point no one had anticipated. Dr. Thompson moved with deliberate steps toward his son's row. His presence transformed the narrow aisle into a courtroom, every passenger now witness to a case being built in real time. His posture was impeccable, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, the stance of a man who had spent decades ensuring his authority could never be questioned. Captain Westmore's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of recognition. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "My son texted me about a situation while I was on a call in the terminal," Dr. Thompson continued, his voice measured but resonant enough to reach every corner of the cabin. "I'm curious what constitutes an unauthorized passenger when he has a valid boarding pass and assigned seat." The captain's body language shifted from authoritative to defensive. His hands, previously planted firmly on his hips, now hung awkwardly at his sides. "Sir, I was simply following." Dr. Thompson raised a hand, silencing the captain mid-sentence. He reached into his jacket, removing a leather wallet. The movement was unhurried, practiced. He flipped it open, revealing the golden shield of the FBI alongside his credentials, holding it at an angle visible to both the captain and nearby passengers. "Captain Westmore," he said, reading the pilot's name badge, "I'd like to understand why you're questioning my son's presence in a seat I purchased for him." A young woman across the aisle raised her phone, its camera lens clearly directed at the confrontation. She wasn't alone. Throughout the cabin, at least a dozen passengers had phones recording the encounter. The modern jury of public opinion was already in session, documenting evidence that would soon spread across social platforms with unstoppable momentum. The captain's face drained of color. The weight of those recording devices seemed to physically press down on his shoulders. I was just following protocol for what?" Dr. Thompson interrupted, his tone sharpening for the first time. "For passengers who look like my son. Because your protocol seems remarkably selective." Captain Westmore's right hand trembled slightly as he reached up to adjust his collar. Sweat beaded at his temples despite the cabin's cool temperature. The authority he'd wielded so confidently minutes earlier evaporated under the heat of Dr. Thompson's controlled anger and professional credentials. "There must be some misunderstanding," the captain stammered, his voice noticeably higher than before. "We take these security precautions with any." "Don't," Dr. Thompson cut him off again. "Don't compound your mistake with dishonesty. I've been observing first class since boarding began. You didn't question the teenage girl in 2D or the college student in 4B. Only my son." The flight attendant who had tried to intervene earlier now stood slightly behind the captain, her expression a mixture of professional concern and personal embarrassment. She caught Dr. Thompson's eye briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Dr. Thompson turned to address her directly. "Please inform your supervisor that I'll be filing a formal complaint. And I'd like the names of everyone who witnessed this incident." "Of course, sir," she replied, relief evident in her voice at having clear direction that aligned with her own sense of justice. The businesswoman across the aisle lowered her phone slightly. "I've been recording since he asked for ID," she said firmly. "I'd be happy to send you the video." Several other passengers nodded in agreement. The solidarity surprised Marcus, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of relief and lingering humiliation. He'd spent so many years handling these situations alone that the public support felt almost disorienting. The captain's face transitioned from pale to ashen as he realized how many passengers had their phones out. His career flashed before his eyes, the viral video labels that would follow him forever: racist pilot, captain profiler, airline bigot. "Now," Dr. Thompson continued, voice lowered but intensity increased, "my son and I are on our way to meet with the Congressional Committee on Civil Rights, where I'm testifying tomorrow. Perhaps you'd like me to mention this incident?" The captain's eyes widened at this revelation. The timing couldn't have been worse for him, not just any FBI official, but one specifically involved with civil rights, traveling to a congressional hearing. "That won't be necessary," Captain Westmore replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding implies confusion between parties," Dr. Thompson replied. "There was no confusion here, only assumption and prejudice." The captain backed away, mumbling further apologies. His retreat was the visual embodiment of power-shifting hands. The passengers watched him go, many with expressions of disgust or disappointment. But Dr. Thompson wasn't finished. He turned to look at the entire cabin, making deliberate eye contact with several passengers. "You know what the truly sad part is," he said, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. "My son worked so hard to qualify for this competition. He should be feeling proud right now, excited about representing his school. Instead, you've taught him another lesson entirely." He turned to Marcus, placing a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was both protective and empowering. "But it's not the lesson you think." Marcus looked up at his father questioningly. The humiliation in his eyes was slowly being replaced by something else, a cautious hope, perhaps, or the recognition that this time might be different. "The lesson," Dr. Thompson said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is that when faced with injustice, you stand up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." A smattering of applause broke out, starting with the businesswoman across the aisle and spreading throughout the cabin. The communal response acted as a healing balm over the wound of public humiliation Marcus had suffered. As the captain retreated toward the cockpit, the sympathetic flight attendant approached with the airline's customer service director already on the phone. She covered the mouthpiece. "They're asking if you'd like to speak directly with their vice president of operations, sir." Dr. Thompson nodded, taking the phone. His conversation was brief but intense, his words too low for most passengers to hear. When he handed the phone back, the flight attendant's eyes had widened considerably. Marcus leaned toward his father. "What did you say to them?" "I simply explained who I am and what happened," Dr. Thompson replied. "And I reminded them that accountability shouldn't require federal credentials." The next 10 minutes passed in a tense holding pattern. The cabin crew moved about with strained smiles, offering complimentary drinks to the first-class passengers. Several people came by to offer words of support to Marcus and his father. Then came the moment no one had anticipated. The announcement system crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. There has been a change in flight crew. Your new captain will be introducing herself shortly. The plane erupted in spontaneous applause. Passengers exchanged looks of disbelief and satisfaction. Marcus and his father shared their own look of surprise. Neither had expected such immediate consequences. 5 minutes later, a new voice came over the intercom. The voice was female, with a slight accent that hinted at Latin American origins. Good afternoon, passengers. This is Captain Elena Ramirez speaking. I'll be your pilot to Washington, D.C. today. We're currently 7th in line for takeoff and should be airborne in approximately 20 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure. At the sound of the name, Dr. Thompson froze. Recognition dawned on his face, a flash of something between shock and déjà vu. The coincidence was too profound to be mere chance. His hand gripped the armrest, knuckles whitening slightly. Marcus noticed his father's reaction immediately. Dad? What's wrong? The plane began to taxi, engines humming with renewed purpose. As they moved toward the runway, Dr. Thompson seemed to be looking into the past rather than the present. And as the plane finally lifted off, Marcus leaned toward his father and whispered, Dad, how do you know Captain Ramirez? Dr. Thompson stared out the window, memories flooding back. That, he said quietly, is a story I should have told you a long time ago. The wheels left the ground, carrying them into the air and toward a revelation 15 years in the making. Want to know the truth about Captain Ramirez and Dr. Thompson's past? Hit subscribe now to make sure you don't miss the shocking conclusion coming tomorrow. The flight to Washington, D.C. proceeded smoothly at 37,000 feet. The confrontation that had dominated the first-class cabin just an hour earlier had transformed into a different kind of tension, the electric anticipation of a story untold. Several passengers had approached Marcus and Dr. Thompson during the flight, offering quiet words of support. A retired teacher pressed a business card into Marcus's hand. I teach at Georgetown, she'd whispered. Call me if you need anything while you're in D.C. The businessman who had initially eyed Marcus suspiciously now seemed unable to meet his gaze, shame evident in his downturned face. The young woman who had recorded the incident shared that her brother had experienced similar profiling at his university. The ripple effects of standing up to injustice were already spreading through the aircraft. But Marcus's mind remained fixed on the cockpit, where Captain Elena Ramirez skillfully guided their journey. Dad, he pressed again as the drink service concluded. You still haven't told me how you know her. Dr. Thompson gazed out the window at the patchwork landscape below. 15 years ago, he began, his voice low enough that only Marcus could hear, I was a field agent in the Civil Rights Division, not yet a deputy director. He described a case that had come across his desk, a promising young pilot named Elena Ramirez who had filed a discrimination complaint against a major airline. Despite graduating at the top of her class, she had been repeatedly passed over for promotion while watching less qualified male colleagues advance. The airline claimed it was performance-based, Dr. Thompson explained, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Her evaluations were stellar. She had more flight hours than any other candidate. But she was Latina, and she was a woman in a field dominated by white men. Marcus listened intently, recognition dawning. You took her case. Dr. Thompson nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. It was early in my career. Many people advised me against it, said it would be career suicide to go after such a powerful airline. But the evidence was clear. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of systemic discrimination. Dr. Thompson had built an airtight case that eventually led to a landmark settlement. The airline was forced to change its promotion practices and pay substantial damages to Captain Ramirez and several other minority pilots. The airline executive who got fired over the case was Richard Westmore's uncle, Dr. Thompson revealed. Westmore himself was just starting his career then. I never made the connection until today. Marcus's eyes widened at the revelation. So when he saw your credentials, he knew exactly who I was, Dr. Thompson confirmed. And exactly what I could do. The plane began its descent into Washington. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime. "What happens to him now?" Marcus asked. "That depends on the airline," Dr. Thompson replied. "But more importantly, it depends on what we choose to do next." As the wheels touched down at Reagan National Airport, Captain Ramirez's voice came over the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Washington, D.C. Local time is 4:45 p.m., and the temperature is 67 degrees. Please remain seated until we reach the gate." There was a brief pause before she continued. "And to our passengers in first class who witnessed today's incident, the airline wishes to extend its sincere apologies. This is not representative of our values or policies. A customer service team will be at the gate to address any concerns." As passengers prepared to deplane, the flight attendant approached their row. "Deputy Director Thompson, Captain Ramirez has requested a moment of your time before you depart the aircraft." Marcus watched his father nod, a mix of emotions crossing his face: pride, nostalgia, and something else Marcus couldn't quite name. The other passengers filed off the plane, many nodding respectfully to Marcus and his father as they passed. When the cabin had emptied, Captain Ramirez emerged from the cockpit, her uniform crisp, her posture impeccable. At 52, Elena Ramirez carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought battles and emerged victorious. "William Thompson," she said, extending her hand. "It's been a long time." Dr. Thompson stood to greet her. 15 years and 4 months. They shook hands, the gesture laden with shared history. "Your son?" she asked, turning to Marcus. "Yes. Marcus, this is Captain Ramirez." Marcus stood, extending his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Captain." "The honor is mine," she replied. "I've been following your father's career since our paths first crossed. He changed the trajectory of my life." She turned back to Dr. Thompson. "I never got the chance to properly thank you." Dr. Thompson shook his head. "You never needed to. You deserve that promotion on merit alone. What happened today with Captain Westmore?" she began. "Was history repeating itself?" Dr. Thompson finished. "Except this time, I was there to witness it firsthand. He's been suspended pending investigation," Captain Ramirez informed them. "And the airline CEO has requested a meeting with you tomorrow morning." Marcus looked between them, witnessing the completion of a circle that had begun before he was born. "I have the congressional testimony in the morning," Dr. Thompson reminded her. 7 a.m., then, she replied without missing a beat. "Before your testimony?" "The CEO insists." Dr. Thompson nodded. "We'll be there." Captain Ramirez turned to Marcus. "I understand you're competing in the National Science Olympiad?" "Yes, ma'am." "Quantum physics?" Marcus nodded, surprised. "My daughter studied the same," she explained. "Full scholarship to MIT." She reached into her pocket and handed him her card. "If you ever need anything, advice, recommendations, someone who understands what it means to be the first or only in a room, call me." 1 year later, Marcus Thompson stood at the podium in the university auditorium, facing a packed room of students and faculty. At 18, he'd already completed his freshman year at MIT, where he'd founded the Coalition for Inclusion in STEM, an initiative that had spread to 12 other universities across the country. "Representation matters," he told the audience, his voice strong and clear. "But representation without support systems is setting people up to fail. That's why our mentorship program pairs incoming minority students with professionals in their fields." In the front row, Dr. William Thompson watched his son with undisguised pride. The incident on Flight 2187 had transformed from a traumatic experience into a catalyst for change. The airline had implemented mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, with Dr. Thompson serving as a consultant on the program's development. Former Captain Westmore had been terminated following an investigation that uncovered previous complaints about his conduct. More importantly, his very public downfall had sent ripples through the industry, prompting other airlines to review their own policies and practices. After the presentation, Dr. Thompson embraced his son. "Your mother would have been so proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I got something today," Marcus said, pulling an envelope from his backpack. "It's a letter of recommendation for my law school application." Dr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Law school? I thought you were committed to physics." "I'm double majoring," Marcus explained. "Physics and pre-law. I want to understand both how the universe works and how to make the human world more just." He handed over the envelope. "Look who wrote it." The letterhead bore the insignia of the airline. The signature at the bottom read Elena Ramirez, Vice President of Operations and Chief Diversity Officer. Dr. Thompson smiled as he read the letter's closing lines. "In Marcus Thompson, I see the same unwavering commitment to justice that I witnessed in his father 15 years ago, a commitment that changed not only my life but the lives of countless others who would follow in my path." His ability to transform painful experiences into platforms for positive change speaks to a character that would honor any law school fortunate enough to admit him. "You know," Dr. Thompson said quietly, "when I took her case all those years ago, I never imagined the ripple effects it would have." Marcus nodded. "That's how change works, isn't it? We may never see all the consequences of standing up for what's right." As they walked across campus together, Dr. Thompson placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "The hardest part of fighting injustice is that sometimes it feels like nothing changes. But today is proof that it does, not always immediately, not always dramatically, but inevitably when enough people refuse to let it stand." Marcus looked up at the clear blue sky, so similar to the view from Flight 2187 a year earlier. "I used to think justice was about fighting back," he reflected. "Now I understand it's about building forward." Behind them, a new class of students filed into the auditorium, ready to learn how one confrontation on an airplane had launched a movement that was slowly changing the face of STEM education across America. That's how justice works in real life. Not in a single moment of triumph, but in the countless lives changed by that moment, a continuous thread weaving through time, connecting past struggles to future victories. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up against injustice matters, even when the results aren't immediately visible. Because sometimes, the most important changes are the ones we don't see until years later.